Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Today we are talking about the latest studio album from my dying bride, entitled A Mortal Binding. This is the 14th full-length studio album from these English metal icons, from these pioneers of death, doom, and gothic metal, responsible for highly influential and also fantastic records like Turn Loose the Swans, The Angel and the Dark River, like Gods of the Sun. Personally, though, I came to know my dying bride back in 2012 with the release of A Map of All of Our Failures, which I wasn't really entirely sure what to think about, how to feel about it. I was just then, at that point, really starting to get interested in death metal, and I mean doom metal and death doom and gothic metal. That was not on my radar. That was not something I was aware of at all. But I remember listening to that album and still feeling deeply moved by it. I think that was one of the first times I had heard something that genuinely sounded so depressing and melancholic and dark. As the decade progressed and as I learned more and more about my dying bride and all of these different subgenres and sounds and ideas and styles and concepts, I grew not only to love that album more and more, but also a lot of other stuff in their discography, including stuff that they were releasing in the 2010s, like Feel the Misery and The Ghost of Orion. The latter of which being, even by my dying bride's standards, an absolute emotional bruiser. I mean, I seriously dare you not to feel something on the track Tired of Tears specifically, where Aaron Stainthorpe is literally singing about his daughter's cancer diagnosis and her near-death experience. God damn, that thing just guts out my soul. With all this in mind, there's no reason not to be anticipating a new My Dying Bride album. They are masters of their craft. I was especially excited after having the opportunity to speak with guitarist Andrew Crahan here on the Metal Meltdown, and we talked a lot about the simultaneously meticulous and simplistic approach to songwriting and production on this album. This is something that has been in the works for quite some time, pretty much ever since The Ghost of Orion dropped over 4 years ago, and there's a lot of influence from old poetry and romantic literature and old English folklore, and there's a lot of strings and horns and beautiful, mournful, clean vocal arrangements and keyboards and organs. But also, the band was trying to strip down their sound and trying to simplify certain elements of certain songs and just kind of let the material breathe and speak for itself. It also has a more earthy and gritty tone and feel, reminiscent of mid-90s My Dying Bride records like the aforementioned The Angel on the Dark River specifically. And the end result is an album that feels very big and very haunting and very beautiful. It may, in my opinion, lack some of the intense emotional oomph of the last few albums, especially key tracks from Ghost of Orion, but it still is more than capable of pulling a few heartstrings here and there if you're not careful. Opening number Her Dominion, for instance, kicks things off on a very massive, powerful, eerie, and mysterious note. There's a lot of variety to this track, and it just bleeds like old school death doom gothic metal vibes and atmospheres. You've got these very dry, throaty, and occasionally really carnivorous guttural vocal assaults and this more simplistic kind of gothic crooning. You've got lumbering, lurching rhythms, vintage doom metal poundings as well, and some wailing guitars. There's a lot going on here for sure, a lot of different movements and progressions and different vocal and guitar techniques and patterns and such, but I don't feel like it's ever too much. I don't feel like this song is too busy. Not only is it very easy to follow, but it's also very satisfying. A fantastic cut to open the record, and honestly one of the best on the record altogether. The simplicity of the structure and of the skeleton of this song allows it to kind of have all these different things happening at once, and it all feels really organic. It all feels very natural. Then there's the second of three bells, which in our aforementioned interview, Andrew described as a funeral march of sorts, and I can definitely see and feel why. This is a very slow-paced, mournful, and depressing cut. I love the dark and gloomy vibe and spirit of this thing. I love the very minimalistic and evocative vocal and guitar work here. The syncopated heavenly choral vocals are a really nice touch as well. The way that they kind of echo and ring out, it feels like I'm at a funeral service in an actual church, and it is also, might I add, pouring rain outside. Just miserable weather. And interestingly, even as we kind of like launch into this really slimy, nasty, slow-paced death metal breakdown closer to the end of this track, the mood does not change whatsoever. In fact, if anything, the feel and the theme and the vibe of this is just better sold. Like when those churning, gritty death metal guitars kick in, like that's the moment where like we're lowering the grave into the ground, and like I'm like a little kid, I've never been to a funeral ever, I don't understand death, and I'm forced to understand it, and it's weird. It's scary. I'm also loving the union of and the chemistry between violins and guitars on the 11.5-minute mammoth cut, The Apocalyptist. Everything here is just so lush, so evocative, so morose. I can just hear and practically feel the violins and guitars swell and ache and blossom and yearn. It's especially cathartic when you have these very simplistic, like, violin melodies just gently gliding over top some really, like, dreadful, powerful, more complex, like, doom metal songwriting and songcraft. Out of all of the cuts here, I think Thornwick Hymn is destined to be the favorite for a lot of people coming out of this album, and I can totally understand why. That is super valid. You've got those awesome drum rolls and drum fills in the very beginning, which do a great job to like build and mount tension and energy and height. You've got lots of great brassy horn work all throughout the track here, the way that trumpets and horns are integrated specifically into that main doom metal riff and melody. Awesome, beautiful, sexy, hot. Love it. Some of Aaron's best clean vocal work on the entire album can be found on here as well. I'm especially loving some of those like haunting vocal harmonies closer to the end. And even like the concept of this thing with these like weird aquatic monsters preying on innocent people, that's brutal as fuck. As Aaron specifically describes, set upon the rugged coast of Yorkshire, Thornwick Village has spent an eternity being haunted by the chill waters that wash its shore and the hidden folk who dwell in the salty depths. Woe betide anyone who fares into the briny sea or even steals too close to its edge, for they may never set foot back on Mother Earth. I'm feeling a very strong 4 to 5 on this bad boy. This is a great album. No fat, no filler, no duds to speak of whatsoever. I love the feel and the atmosphere and the vibe and the aura of this thing. I love how big and immersive and consuming this album is. I love how it can feel like it's doing so little, but it's doing so much. It really does feel like a combination of the best elements of like old school My Dying Bride, like 90s My Dying Bride, and everything the band have done and learned from like 2012 onwards. And there's no doubt in my mind whatsoever, longtime fans are gonna eat this fucking thing up. I would recommend this to people who aren't already familiar with My Dying Bride. I would have no issue with that. In fact, honestly, this could make a really great kind of entry point into this band and into like death doom and gothic metal as a whole if you're not already like super into these sounds and styles. I don't really have much more to say, so I feel like this is a really good place to just kind of wrap things up. Once again, really strong 4 to 5, great album. Definitely check it out when it comes out this coming weekend. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be. So what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe right here so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. Look, aforementioned interview with Andrew Crahan. Definitely check that out. Look, something else. I don't even know. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.